The article titled US-China Anchorage Dialogue, U.S. Crusade Mindset is Obsolete and Cannot Serve the Purpose Anymore, written by Shazia Anwer Cheema, says that there was nothing new in the behavior and conduct of the U.S. diplomats at Anchorage Dialogue, but the thing which was astonishingly new for the U.S. and the world, a clear loss of the luxury of being a big brother, who is wealthy, wise, and resourceful. So, every discussion ever with this big brother had always been about what he wants and what he is capable of. In a common scenario, this is called bullying. The writer Shazia Anwer Cheema is an analyst writing for national and international media outlets including Pakistan Observer, Eurasia Diary, Insight, and MENA News Agency. She heads the thought center of Dispatch News Desk, DND. She did her MA in Cognitive Semiotics from Aarhus University, Denmark, and is currently registered as a Ph.D. Scholar of Semiotics and Philosophy of Communication at Charles University Prague. She can be reached at her Twitter at Shazia Anwer, email shaziaanwer@yahoo.com/caption. Listen her article now. The first high-level meeting between U.S. Chinese officials under the new Biden administration got off to a chilly start on Thursday, with senior American diplomats accusing China of threatening world stability and Chinese officials alleging America is a human rights hypocrite due to its mistreatment of black citizens, commented U.S. think tank online newspaper Politico. Chinese Foreign Office through official spokesman Zhao Jian has sent a message to United States that U.S. should see with crystal clarity that China's internal affairs allow no interference. This message is loud and clear, and the whole world has listened and saw this at Alaska Dialogue. Chinese spokesman Zhao Jian during his media briefing stated Chinese delegation went to Anchorage for the strategic dialogue with sincerity, fully prepared to engage in dialogue with the U.S. according to the protocols and arrangements agreed on beforehand. But when the Chinese delegation arrived in Anchorage, their hearts were chilled by the biting cold as well as the reception by their American host. Zhao Jian blamed that as the U.S. side first delivered opening remarks, they exceeded severely the set time limit and wantonly attacked and criticized China's domestic and foreign policies. These are hardly good host manners or proper diplomatic etiquette. The Chinese side has made a solemn response, commented Zhao Jian. Apart from the chill of moods and Alaska, the thing which could be considered new in the US-China meeting was peer pressure. Yes, something the US is not familiar with since the Cold War, after considering, the only peer Russia, gone with the wind. There was nothing new in the behavior and conduct of the US diplomats, however the thing which was astonishingly new for the US and the world, a clear loss of the luxury of being a big brother, who is wealthy, wise, and resourceful. So, every discussion ever with this big brother had always been about what he wants and what he is capable of. In a common scenario, this is called bullying. The first high-level diplomatic event of the Biden administration contextualized not something like Trump diplomacy, which has been so for projecting as a failure by them, started with a moral dictation of decency and subjugation, frosted with threats regarding Russia, Iran, Venezuela, and China. It seems as the US is having intellectual sclerosis because lectures about morality and democracy are much needed for themselves instead of China. As China has always been clear about both. It is America who must explain morality and democracy, especially in coming times more than ever. The US tries to give the get-in-line impression which China did not buy. More off China gives the impression of resetting and changing of default mode. China gave the clear-cut idea that economic leverage is today's reality and self-centered US foreign policy driven by Pentagon is not the face of the future. US crusade mindset is obsolete and cannot serve the purpose anymore. The US policy of having fewer enemies means having fewer customers internally for military complex can only serve the purpose of threat inflation, but the idea of actual war, especially for China, is far-flung because China has the most powerful weapon of the economic silencer. China does not need to play the fairy tale game of rescuing the fairy by punishing the genie. This old play is boring and has lost its cover. All those heavy-budget Hollywood movies have become a farcical tale of heroism, a crude selfish try to justify inhuman and immoral acts under the umbrella of rescuing humanity. All those Super, Iron, or even Batman are mockeries at the face of humanity. The regions that never ask for a rescue got bombarded just because a hero wants to act heroically according to his misjudgment. The latest pun could be that how and why the all-time savior is unable to save us from this current pandemic. Satire apart, US has failed heroically in dealing with COVID-19 pandemic, which reminds all those apocalypse films where an American is always there to save the earth. But life is not a film, and reality has triggered the fact ever worse, why the US feed the world with all those phony claims that they are best and they are always right. This mindset was so visible during this particular diplomatic event that it poses the question of whether the US will be ever able to face the hard facts of the time. Diplomacy is the opposite of arrogance and self-obsession, hence seasoned US diplomats charged with these elements are proven unable to negotiate and debate. They can only dictate, and that's what the US tried to do with China in Alaska and got swear reservations by the civil community about US incapability for prospective foreign diplomacy. Past has gone, and the US also has to learn to play on level bearing fields and try to get rid of the habit of being on the higher ground, as the US has lost the higher ground in the case of China. The situation with Russia was entirely different. To create hegemony against Russia was easy because Russia failed to establish economic cost and benefit relationship with US allies. On the other hand, China has created massive economic relations across the board, allies or not. That's why the US has lost its dominance leverage, so just using the tripwire effect will not be last long and effective. Sooner US will admit that China is a peer, better it will help Biden foreign policy to get reset. Chinese view about dialogue is that China is taking an important step, and dialogue can be a good opportunity to enhance communication, manage differences, and expand cooperation between China and United States. Chinese official view of dialogue also include that it will help guide bilateral relations going forward, and people in both countries and beyond all hope to see practical outcomes from this dialogue. However, US quarters do not look serious about the dialogue, which was actually invited by US President Biden. The Straits Times, a US newspaper, has an excellent headline about dialogue. The Straits Times headline was as simple as, "Is this the way you hope to hold this dialogue? US-China high-level talks in Alaska descend into bickering." Newspaper writes that U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, while opening the dialogue with host delegation of China, raised concerns about recent cyber attacks, the treatment of Muslim minorities in Xinjiang, and Beijing's increasing control over Hong Kong. He said China's actions threaten the international order and human rights. Newspaper rightly asked U.S. authorities that, "Is this the way you hope to hold this dialogue?"